Hello, my name is Dan Siegel, and it's an honor to introduce you to the hand model of the brain. Sometimes the brain in our head is modeled as a plastic model, like the one you see here, that's 2 times life size. And it's fun to carry a big model around this size because you can take it apart and look at some of the insides and see what's going on. But it's hard to carry this around in everyday life. So what I invented was a model of the brain that you actually have in your hand. My daughter has urged me not to call it a handy model, but it is kind of handy. And the model goes like this. If this brain were oriented in my head in this direction, with this frontal part here behind the forehead, we would create this in our hand model by putting our thumb in the middle, our fingers over the top, and this would be oriented this way. Now, the hand model of the brain is very useful because when you know about the parts of the brain, you can learn how to direct your attention in a way that can get certain areas to not only get activated, but also to start to work together, and you can change both the function and the structure of your brain by knowing about how the brain is structured. So let's walk through these areas of the brain and how they can link together. This hand model of the brain has been useful in classrooms, it's been useful in corporate offices, it's been useful for mediation, for meditation, for people out in the field working with the stresses of working with epidemics, and for people who are just in general trying to improve their lives. So let's go through this hand model and see how it can support your work and your life. If you take your hand and put your thumb in the middle and fold your fingers over the top, this would be the completed model. The top of the brain is called the cortex and would be represented in your fingers. If you lift up the cortex, you'll see beneath it the limbic area, which should have 2 thumbs to be a perfect model, but most of us just have 1. And in this limbic area, you see that there are connections upwards to the cortex and even downwards to the area just below it called the brain stem in your palm. And this whole head brain is connected to the body through a number of regions, including the spinal cord represented in your wrist. Now let's quickly review what these areas do, and you can see how what you do with your mind can change the way the brain functions. If we lift up the cortex and lift up the limbic area, let's begin with the brain stem. The brain stem is the oldest part of this head brain, and I keep on saying head brain because you have neurons around your heart and around your intestines that people are calling the gut brain and the heart brain. And so I'll use the word just brain, but actually it's a hand model of the head brain. The deepest, oldest part of the head brain is this brain stem. It takes in information from the body and it helps regulate things like how you breathe and how you digest food, how your heart functions. In addition, the brainstem has a very important set of regions that create the fight, flight, freeze, and faint response that comes when we feel threatened. So if you're working in a business, for example, or you're in a classroom or you're at home and you feel threatened by what's going on, the brainstem gets involved to create this reactive state. In addition, this brainstem works closely with, if you put your next area down, the thumb region, which is the limbic area. This is a 200 million year old region when we became mammals that works with the 300 million year old reptilian brain, and together they work to create emotion in working with the body. The body, brainstem, limbic area create emotion. The brainstem works with the limbic area to also motivate us, to drive our behaviors. And this limbic area appraises the meaning of things, whether things are significant or not, whether they're good or bad. In addition, there are certain ways memory is divided up and connected through the limbic area with an area you may have heard, the hippocampus, or with its amygdala region. And then on top of that, you have the attachment experience we have as mammals, where we connect with caregivers so that they can protect us and we can be soothed by them, is also mediated by this limbic region, not just in childhood, but throughout our whole lifespan. Now, these limbic functions work closely if you fold your fingers over with the cortex, which is basically making maps. So this region makes maps of the outside world with our eyes in the back, the occipital cortex. Sound comes in the side, the temporal lobe, with the way in which we map out sound. And you even have an area in the front from these second to last knuckles forward called the frontal cortex, also known as the association cortex, where you make associations in thought. And the frontmost part of this frontal lobe here is demarcated by your last knuckles down to your fingernails, and this is called the prefrontal cortex. Now, you may have heard a lot about the prefrontal cortex because it's involved basically in something called integration. It integrates cortex, limbic area, you can see it sits on top of it, brainstem, body, and even the social world together. Now, when you do a practice, let's say like we have a wheel of awareness practice as a form of mindfulness meditation, or do any kind of mindfulness reflective practice, you are integrating the whole system. When you're not integrated, it can become chaotic and rigid. It's like flipping your lid. So instead of living with harmony within yourself and harmony and connection to others, you're literally becoming chaotic with an outburst or rigid and withdrawn. That's demonstrated by literally lifting up your fingers and showing how this prefrontal region is no longer linking the cortex, limbic area, brainstem, body, and the social world. It's become disintegrated. Now, the amazing thing is there's a new set of studies called the connectome studies, which show how the areas of the brain that are differentiated can then become connected. So it's connectome. And what research has shown from the Human Connectome Project is the best predictor of your well-being is how interconnected your connectome is. So anything you can do to understand your hand model of the brain and to bring an honoring of differences and a connection of these areas, you'll be promoting integration, and you'll be giving yourself the gift that keeps on giving. And the amazing thing too is that integration is likely the source of well-being, not just in our bodies, including the head brain, but in our relationships with other people and even with nature around us. Creativity emerges from this integration. Collaboration emerges from integration. So the hand model of the brain reminds us to know the different parts, understand how they may be differentiating themselves if we're angry or getting upset, feeling sad, feeling lonely, making thoughts that emerge, and then opening ourselves to all of these and connecting them together. Whether you do this in the wheel of awareness practice or some other kind of reflective practice, having this brain of yours become more integrated is the pathway toward more well-being in your life, whether it's at work, at home, or in your communities. Integration creates well-being. Thanks for joining me, and goodbye.